Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to 2026. I am so excited. I hope that you are also excited about 2026. And if you are not, for whatever reason, maybe there are things in your industry, things in your business, things in your personal life that are causing you to be less than excited, then stick with us, my friend, because that will change. All right. So I thought I would start us off by telling you what to expect from this here podcast, what to expect from us as a business overall, why you should stay, what we will be talking about, what we will not be talking about, changes that you can expect, uh, both in the business as well as from me as your host, just all the things. All right. I think it's great for us to kind of recalibrate and decide, oh yeah, this is a podcast that I want to listen to, or nah, I ain't really feeling it. Okay. What we consume matters. We should all be being intentional about the things that we consume. So this podcast episode is really designed to help you decide whether this is a good spot for you and to pencil in the things that we will be talking about. Okay. So let's do it. Number one, the first change that we have made, which you may or may not have noticed, is a name change. Uh, Our first year of podcasting, the name of our podcast was The Entrepreneur's Couch. For those of you who are new and joining us, welcome. Okay. And we have changed the name to just The Couch. And a big part of that is because some of the people that I serve are not entrepreneurs, right? We have a pretty big audience from a entrepreneur perspective, and big. And to be clear, I don't mean millions of followers big, but I mean up until this point, our focus has been entrepreneurial. But in the last few years, we have gone much more into the B2B nonprofit kind of space. And so we want that change to be reflected throughout the brand. And so we just eliminated the entrepreneurs part, although of course we will still be talking to you all, but it just allows for us to talk to both our entrepreneurs and our institutions. Okay. Our focus, right? You may have you may have seen the change in tagline, right? This is also kind of narrows us in a wee bit because we are the place where you come if you are a helper, a helping professional, right? You are essentially serving others. This is where you come to get your own help. That is the number one focus of this podcast, friend. And when we say helpers, sometimes that is not a title in the job, right? A lot of us have helping professional roles, coaches, consultants, therapists, teachers, nurses, doctors, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of my clients are helpers by personality, meaning they are wired to give. They are wired for responsibility. They are leaders. They're husbands and wives and mothers and, just all of these different non-professional roles, but still very much a helper in their heart. You are welcome here, my friend. Okay. That is our first change. Okay. So the couch is essentially your go-to resource for impact-driven individuals and institutions to scale their impact, not just their company, right? Notice the shift in language there. This is where you come to learn how to change broken systems, start your own social movement, and probably be surprised by the simple truth behind extraordinary impact, right? This is my number one platform, right? So when it comes to sharing my expertise, my education, my experience, et cetera, this is where I do it. Yes, I share on TikTok and Facebook and these other platforms, threads, whatnot. But this is my primary platform. Anything I share on those other platforms is always going to be shorter. Most of my videos on TikTok are, 2 or 3 minutes, right? The things that I write on Facebook are typically shorter. This is where I spend the bulk of my time. Okay. So if you want to hear from me, this is where you should come above everywhere else. Okay. All right. So here are some of the things that we will be talking about throughout 2026. And also, just as an FYI, there is a request form, right? It is linked in the description of this podcast and should also be linked in many of the episodes specifically. Now, sometimes they do get missed in the episodes. We will be mindful of that, but just know that you can always find it in the description of the podcast, okay? Because we would love to talk about the things that you want us to talk about, provided that they are within our expertise, okay? And they are on brand for us. So here are some of the things that we will be talking about throughout the year. Number one, in a broad kind of stroke, anything to do with reaching your potential and fulfilling your assignment is what we will be talking about on this podcast. That is our focus, is to help you reach your potential and fulfill your assignment. And for those of you who don't really know what fulfill your assignment means, because that's kind of a black way of saying purpose, calling, mission, that kind of a thing. You have goals, right? I don't really care whether they're personal or whether they're professional, right? A lot of the people who follow me are going to be very impact driven. And so they have kind of changed the world kind of goals, which we love. We love all of that. But I also want you to see how valuable your personal goals are that may seem a little less change the world, but many times, in fact, are. So, example, I read a story, or I think I was actually listening to a video. And in short, it was a wife who was talking about losing her husband, right? And how she now has all of this money, right? He had a pension and a 401k and, like 2 or 3 different things that she was now going to inherit. And she was basically just trying to figure out what she should do with the money, pay the house off, blah, 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 blah. The context of the conversation was very financial. But the thing that I pulled out that she said was her husband always talked about and always focused on making sure that she and the family was taken care of when he was gone. That was his purpose. That was his assignment. Okay. You see how that has nothing to do with changing the world per se, but it's still a huge goal and still a powerful goal, because what if people just did that? What if anyone who was the head of their household, whether it was a man or a woman, took that one goal seriously? Would the world be a better place? Sure, it would. It would be less elderly people who do not have retirement, right? It would be more people who are taken care of. Like, that is a powerful goal. And so anything to do with your personal goals, especially the big goals, we love the big goals over here, okay? And fulfilling whatever you feel called to do, this is going to be your podcast for that, okay? More specifically, kind of the domains that we operate in. A lot of this is personal development. Many of you know that I spent the first half of my career as a therapist, and therefore we do a lot of performance coaching, professional development, personal development kind of stuff. So all of that is going to definitely go on the podcast. The other thing that we speak a lot about, which we did not talk a lot about on the podcast last year, was around program development. We did a lot of program development uh, as the work we do, but we did not speak so much about it on the podcast. That will be changing. We will be talking about program development. And when I say program development, what I mean is, on the entrepreneur side, that looks like whatever your expertise is, turning it into intellectual property, into frameworks and curriculum and programs, and right, because this is how you build a scalable business, is by having a group program. And so we do a lot with group programming, both from facilitating programs, dealing with client issues that come up in client programs, designing them, all the things. So we'll be talking about that. On the nonprofit side, it's the same thing, but they don't really call them group programs in the same way. What we actually do is design interventions. So we'll be talking a lot about interventions on this podcast moving forward. We will be talking about positioning and planning, right? So one of the bigger things that I see in the industry is that there is a lack of clarity and a lack of direction, right? We're a little bit all over the place, which is what ends up causing so many pivots, right? So we're going to be talking about positioning and planning because it's how you stabilize yourself. And let me say it differently. It's how you stabilize the business, right? Remember that you and the business are separate. You and the company are separate. And so stabilizing you is all of the personal and professional, or the personal and performance stuff that we'll talk about. But the positioning and planning is how you stabilize the business, right? So we'll be talking about that kind of thing. And then lastly, we will talk a lot around personnel, right? And I don't mean hiring a team and managing a team. That we are not that podcast for that, right? What I mean is it takes people for you to scale your impact, right? Think about the government agencies that you're involved in. Think about the community-based programs that they have. The same is true for your company and your business. You will not fulfill your purpose by yourself. Like, let's just get that out. We gonna have a whole conversation about hiring from the perspective of it is required. A lot of us on the entrepreneur side get tired of hiring people, don't like managing people, and yet it is required to fulfill your assignment. So we'll talk about that tension, and we'll also talk about all the things that look like equipping your team to actually be impactful, not to do their jobs, because again, I'm not the coach to teach them, you know, all the marketing and sales or tech or that's not we do all of that, but we don't teach that. Okay. Not from a team perspective. When I say personnel, I'm talking about a lot of the work that we do is cultural competency training, anti-bias training. Like, we're talking about how to make sure that your people are good at serving people, not good at serving whatever other, not just good at whatever their job is. Okay. So we'll be talking about that kind of stuff on the podcast. Here are some of the future episodes, including the next one that we'll be talking about that you can expect. And again, if there's a topic that you want to hear about, we want to know about it, click the link in the show notes. Let us know. We'll pencil it in. Okay. All right. So some of the episodes that I know for sure we'll be talking about. The very first one that I will be doing is a series. You know, I love a good series. And because we are starting the podcast a little late, we're like a week behind because for those of you who do not know, I had surgery the day before Christmas, had my tonsils removed. I did not realize I was not going to be able to talk for 2 weeks. I thought it was going to be a couple of days of, the recovery. They did tell me that the recovery was weeks and weeks long, but I thought it was from a pain perspective, not from I'm not going to be able to talk. That would have been helpful to know. Neither here nor there. Here we are. So because we did not do a podcast the first week of the year, I decided to do a series to kind of start us off, right? And our series is going to be called The 5 Lessons 2025 Tried to Teach You, right? And it is basically my perspectives about all the things that happened in the marketplace that I hope that you learned and observed and actually made real adjustments to. I used to have a coach who said, learn the lesson, make the adjustment, right? It's like, okay, well, what was that trying to teach you? Number one, pull the lesson out and then make whatever adjustment that you need to make as a result of the lesson. And what I find is that people don't learn the lesson and therefore they never make the adjustment, right? And because I often see things that other people do not see, I figured I would share a little bit about. It's less of a reflection of my like personal lessons. Y'all don't need my personal lessons. That's for my own life. But it's more of a reflection of the lessons that I see about the marketplace, right? Marketplace, the clients that we serve, from, the masterminds that we're in, from colleagues and peers, just industry kind of stuff. So we're going to start the year off strong with that. I'm going to do a 2026 State of the Union kind of address for both the online education industry and also the nonprofit industry. There are some things that I need to say in relation to both industries that I think would serve you well. So we'll be talking about that. I'm going to be doing, this is a change. I'm going to be doing more trending topics. So typically, I am not a person who talks about things that happens in the marketplace from a like celebrity, political kind of perspective, right? The only time I talk about things that are happening that are trending are things that happen in our industry. That's it. I'm not a celebrity person. That's just not my thing. However, that is one thing that we will be changing for 2026. And the reason is because there are all of these lessons that we could be pulling out as a result of these, kind of public, oftentimes debacles, but sometimes positive changes, positive things, right? And I think, again, same point that we often miss the lessons. So as I'm talking about this, I'm thinking Pastor Jamal Bryant, um, who has been in the news in the last week in relation to his wife and what she wore to a event. And there's just been all kind of commentary. Again, normally I would not talk about that because I don't care what that woman wore. I don't care what that man is doing. What are we talking about? Stay focused, okay? But I do feel like there are a lot of leadership lessons that I could pull out. We have a curriculum called the public figure that we teach inside of our program. And I just think it would be really valuable to pull out some leadership lessons, not my personal opinions about what she wore, right? And so we will be talking about lots of trending things in the media from a leadership perspective, from an impact perspective, because the goal is for you to become the person that you need to become in order to finish your assignment. Okay. And there are lots of lessons that we can pull out in relation to that. Okay. Of course, I will be sharing personal stories about different things, right? I will talk about the 3 surgeries that I had at the end of 2025 and how that impacted business, how it impacted me. I'll be talking about dating stuff. Again, all of this personal stories that I share will be specifically to serve one of 2 goals, right? Either to help you reach your potential or to help you fulfill your assignment. Those are the only purposes that we have here, people, right? If you want to learn a specific thing outside of that, this probably is not the podcast for you, right? Some podcasts are about marketing. Some podcasts are about automation. Some podcasts are about marriage and health, right? We're not going to be talking about all of those things in detail, right? We're going to be talking about the things that have to do with you reaching your potential and you fulfilling your assignment. Okay, that's it. All right. Um, Other changes. We will be doing the podcast twice a week, right? Remember when I said this was or maybe I did not say this. I cannot remember. This is my primary place. Yes, I did say that. And because it is my primary place, I got way more stuff to say than once a week. So we are committing to a twice a week schedule for 2026. All right. We will be dropping a podcast on Monday and dropping a podcast on Thursday. Typically, they will be out around 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, we may do it a little bit earlier because I have some people who are on PST and, different places around the world. But early morning is the goal. So you can listen to it at your convenience. Remember, we would love to hear from you, right? I love when people inbox me on Facebook. Also, as a heads up, Facebook is my secondary platform. It is my number 1 social media platform. So if you ever want to ask a question to me about something we talked about, I am open to that. I know some people don't like that. They don't want you inboxing them. They feel like you trying to get free coaching. Girl, I don't care nothing about that. Ask away, comment away. It does not bother me. Again, now, if you want to submit a specific question for me to talk about on the podcast, that is not the best place to DM me. The form is the best place to drop a specific request. But if there is ever anything that we talk about, you are always welcome to DM me on Facebook. Now, if you DM me on some other platform, I probably will not respond. I'll be honest with you. We don't use other platforms like Instagram, and we will be doing a little more LinkedIn this year. So you could, but just know Facebook is my number 1 platform. Every other place will take me longer. Okay. Um, Here's the number 1 personal change that you can expect from the podcast. Okay. So this year I'm gonna be talking my shit. We just gonna say it like we gonna say it. Okay. Normally I approach my social media content. Now, if you are a client of mine, right, then you already know I'm gonna talk my shit, right? But when it comes to my marketing specifically, I do not typically go all in, right? You may or may not be like, LaChelle, you always saying stuff. I know, but there's levels to this. And I do not say even 50% of the things that I think. I do not do that. I am not a person who uses the online space as my personal dumping ground. I think it's unprofessional personally because I take my leadership role very seriously. And so there are just a lot of things that I do not say, right? A lot of times I observe things and I make adjustments in my own life. I make adjustments in my client delivery and I keep it moving, right? I don't actually share it from a marketing perspective. But this year, y'all gonna get what y'all gonna get, okay? And here's why. Here's why I'm doing this. Number one, I did my own 2025 reflection, right? I pray that you also did your reflection. You didn't just set goals for 2026, which I hope you have, but I also hope that those goals were informed by 2025, right? Not 100% based on 2025, but at least informed to some degree by 2025. There's so much power in reflection, right? And so in my own reflection for 2025, one of the things that I realized is I need to step fuller. That's probably not the best way to say that, but I said what I said. Okay. I need to step fully, that's probably better, into my own leadership, which in part has to do with me using my voice in a different way, right? We should all be stepping into our leadership. But one of the big things that we will be talking about uh, is evolving and not pivoting, right? Most of my clientele is 40 and above, right? And that usually means that they are in some kind of evolution, right? There are changes that they are making, right? And I used to talk a lot about pivoting because a lot of my clients are pivoting either in their personal life with divorces and health scares and elder care and, that kind of change, or they're making changes in their business or their niche, blah, blah, blah. And so we used to talk a lot around, all of those kind of changes. But what we're kind of moving to or tweaking our messaging around is we need to evolve and not pivot because pivot is just, I see so many people making changes, but they're lateral. Like they're not actually elevating. They're not actually increasing. They're just going in cycles. And it's like, oh, that was supposed to be a season, not a cycle, right? And so part of getting out of a cycle is learning to step up into your own leadership, whatever your next level of leadership is. Okay. And so one of the gaps in my own leadership is just not using my voice to say all the things that I need to say. Right. And that causes you to like exist and coexist and blend in and be average. And if it's one thing it is, I'm not any of those things. Okay. So this year you will hear me saying things that you uh probably will not be surprised by. Okay. It won't be something drastically different. It will just be more. That is the main change because I see things that I just don't say. And I feel a sense of duty, responsibility to be more vocal about the things that I think would benefit you. So this is the year that you can expect me to talk my shit. Okay. All right. I would like to make a request, give you permission kind of thing, however you want to look at that. As I step into my own authority and as I step into my kind of my own leadership, um, one of the things that has historically held me back from using my voice is if you are a Black woman, there is a good chance that you have been called aggressive, intimidating, some version of that. Now, not all Black women experience that, but a lot of us experience that, especially those of us who have what I would consider to be a more direct form of communication. And I'm at the top of that list when it comes to people who have a direct form of communication. I am not a person who is conflict avoidance. I do not shy away from conflict. I tell you what I think and how I feel and what I want. Okay. And over time, people respond to you in a particular way when you are that kind of person. Right. So I've had a lot of years of people feeling like I was intimidated. And it took me some time to figure out, well, am I intimidating or are you intimidated? because those are not quite the same, right? Both could be true, but instead of me fully owning being intimidating, what I could fully own is that people will be intimidated by me. It's a slight adjustment, but it becomes really important for how you see you, right? And so here's a great example of what I mean. This was probably some months ago at this point. I went to dinner with a friend, and while we were at dinner, the waiter that we had was a little what I would call ditzy, right? And so we both gave our orders and he got it wrong. And so I said, okay, let's just start over because I think you might have misunderstood, part of our order. And so I repeated it, I said it again. He still got it wrong. And so then I slowed down. I said, okay, let's just go one by one because I think you got this part right, but not this other part right. Right. And so we finally got it ironed out. He realized what it was. He was very grateful, very polite, was not upset that I corrected him. But his language let me know that he was perceiving me a certain way, despite the fact that I was patient and I was kind, I was not rude, right? I was not any of the things that I think of when I think of aggressive or intimidating or, you know, but I did correct him several times. Okay. And I did make sure that we get it right. So he goes away. Uh, we go back to our conversation. He comes back a few minutes later, sits down next to me, which is odd for a waiter to do. Okay. And he basically says, hey, I put the order in, but the cook was confused about one part. And I said, oh, wait, before I tell you, let me go back and make sure because I know that if I don't get this right, I'm going to be in trouble. Right. It's that kind of a language that lets you know that people perceive you a certain way. And in these, 1 or 2 minute uh, interactions, he used so much language that let me know how he was perceiving me. Again, not in a mean, he was very nice, but he used words like, I will be in trouble, or, Mama Bear will get me, or I better get it right. And I was like, well, what am I doing that's letting you know, right? And I'm not, again. So he sits down to me. He was like, I just want to make sure, because I don't want to get in trouble, blah, blah, blah. So I repeated it. We got it together. He left. Okay. So I thought it was such an interesting interaction because he used so much language that I would have not perceived myself as. But when he left the second time, my friend said, I think this is what you're talking about. This interaction is a good example of conversations that he and I have had in the past, right? Meaning my friend and I who were at dinner. Uh, and he says, "Mm, people do perceive you a way because you do come across a way. And so we ended up having this whole conversation around how I am a person who challenges him, right? I don't just let him get away with anything, right? I ask tough questions and I hold him accountable and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And, from his perspective, he was like, I appreciate it. I like it. I think it's a good quality, but I also understand why some people, might perceive it differently. So I say all of that to say that that is exactly who I am. I am a person who is going to challenge you. I am a person who is going to hold you accountable. And because other people have perceived that negatively, mostly professionally, my friends appreciate it. My kids hit or miss, right? Family hit or miss, right? But it is mostly in my professional life where it has come across as quote unquote negative, which I internalized over the years, which then causes me to be very mindful of how I say certain things, right? I have learned to code switch, right? Walk on eggshells, all the things. And in addition to that, it isn't just, how people respond to me, but it is also having been on the receiving end of other people's either unprofessionalism or rudeness or um that I just don't like. I actually have also witnessed a lot of people, but again, particularly Black women who have communicated with me in a way that I did not love. Okay. And so I say all of that to say that I'm very mindful. I have always been very mindful. I don't want to say always because, I'm human. But in my professional life, I'm very mindful of how I communicate. And on this here podcast, we're going to let that go. We gonna let all of the intimidate, aggressive, kind of noise that's in the back of my mind, we're gonna let that go in 2026 because that's keeping me from stepping into my own leadership and saying the things that I think would serve you, right? Because the truth is, if we were honest, yes, I am intimidating. I understand that. Yeah, I completely agree with that. But I'm also warm and relatable and funny. And I don't know if I would say I'm nice. That one is questionable. But the point is, even though I am very direct in my communication, I'm also lovable, right? I have a loving way that I hold you to your shit. And sometimes I forget the second part. I forget that I am both and so we will be stepping fully into that. The request that I have, because I know I took a little detour, tell you a little story, make it a little more concrete. The request that I have is that if you listen to this podcast and you like LaChelle too much, you doing way too much. Like that was a lot, okay? Because sometimes when I step into my full, because again, you ain't getting full or you ain't getting full nowhere in my marketing. My marketing is not where you should be getting full from my perspective. Right? Like you're gonna get real. You're not gonna get something different than who I am. But I don't think the fullness of who I am should show up in my marketing. That is my personal opinion. But I do think more of me needs to show up in my marketing, just because my voice is powerful, right? And a lot of the things that I say are powerful, and they don't need to just be reserved for clients behind closed doors and my own personal life. So if you start to get mean girl energy, most of the time when people talk to me about their opinions of me, I ignore them. I'll be honest with you. Okay. There is a difference between being coachable and being grounded in who you are. So there are lots of times if I'm in a coaching context, well, of course I am going to be open-minded and, consider what the coach is saying. But I'm talking about in these social media, I just ignore y'all because what? However, if you start to get mean girl energy from me, I want you to tell me. I want you to inbox me on Facebook and be like, okay, that thing you was talking, I still might not listen to you, to be clear, because I'm an adult. Like we all have our own free will. I am going to be open-minded enough to hear you, but when I mean listen to you, I mean I may ultimately decide not that I don't care. I will be open-minded enough to hear you, right? But ultimately, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. Okay. As you should be doing in your own life. But it doesn't mean that I don't want to hear, right? Because we all need feedback, right? Particularly in the areas that are not our strengths, right? And one of the things that is not a strength for me, I'm a great communicator. Uh, however, sometimes I get a little too black and it gets a little wild. Okay. So I need to just be mindful of that. And sometimes my tone, right? Like, even though I'm mindful of it, I don't always get it right. So, long story short, love for you to tell me. Okay. Just don't be offended if 2 weeks from now you be like, I thought I told you not to say that. And then you said it again. Remember that I'm grown. Okay. Let's just keep that in mind. And I still get to choose. Right. Because here's the thing. I remember having this conversation. See an inbox with someone and the lady was inquiring about some kind of service. I forget what we were offering or what she was wanting, but it was a service-based conversation, I believe. And one of the things that she said was, "You do too much cussing. Like cussing is ungodly, and it's not good. You should stop doing that." I ignored her. Because what I said was, I think what you mean to say that perhaps you're not, fully able to communicate is that you do not like cussing and would prefer to not hear cussing, which is reasonable. Nothing wrong with that. That ain't got nothing to do with me cussing. That's like a personal preference, right? Your opinion is that cussing is bad. That's fine. I think we all. My preference is to wear yellow. Okay, you might hate yellow. Also okay. In this cancel culture society, we need to get okay with people being different. Okay. So I say all that to say sometimes you are not going to like the way I'm presenting, but you not liking it doesn't make it bad. It may mean that I'm not the best person for you to listen to. That's fair. Okay. Because if you do not like cussing, yeah, that's tough. This might not be the pocket. Now, to be clear, I don't do a ton of cussing, right? From a professional standpoint, I do cuss. You gonna hear me cuss. I just said I'm popping my shit this year. Okay. But if that kind of thing isn't, yeah, I get it. I feel you. There's some stuff I just don't want to hear. So I said all that to say, please tell me. I said that was my very long version of saying, expect me to say more things. And if you start to get mean girl energy from me, tell me. Otherwise, I hope that you stick around because I want you to win, friend. And I see too many people in survival mode. And not just survival mode financially, because I know that's the first thing that we think of. That's the first thing that we hear when we hear survival mode. But the number of people who are successful and out of alignment, like it's not just a money thing. Okay. So survival mode, you could be making a ton of money and be unfulfilled. That's called survival mode. You could be making a ton of money, but you're working in your business and not on your business. Also survival mode. You could be making a ton of money and just not be doing this thing that you want to do. One of the biggest conversations, I should have added this as a topic. One of the things that we will be talking about is actually living your dream life, not this like life of obligation. Like half the people I see on this here internet are not doing the thing that they're called to do. They're doing the thing that they feel like they have to do. No, no, dramatic pause. I want you to hear that pause. Right. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about is there's a book that is called uh what is it called? It is Put Your Ass Where Your Heart Wants to Be. It's by Stephen Pressfield, who is a great author. He also wrote the book of I think it's called The War on Art or The War of Art, one of the two, right? Which is a book about people who are creative and they're called to do something and the resistance and the fear that they feel. Um, but a big part of your work is to figure out what you desire and go towards that thing. Not the thing adjacent to that thing, but the actual thing. And that's what I will be encouraging you to do all 2026. All right. Onward and upward, friend.